Hi everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoy our shows, please like our videos and subscribe to our channel. And you can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 30th of October 2019, and our guest today is the British-Irish spokesperson for the international appeal to stop 5G on Earth and in space. She's a former United Nations editor, an author and researcher, and has a master's degree in intercultural competence. Claire Edwards. Claire Edwards, it's wonderful to have you on the show and welcome to Denmark.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with you.
You are a former United Nations editor and have now become a spokesperson for the international appeal to stop 5G on Earth and in space. But why are you going against the rollout of 5G? A lot of people, a lot of scientists say that it's just something that we are now going to have in order to have a faster running internet connection.
5G is potentially an annihilation event for this planet. 5G was marketed as 5G because it was intended for people to believe that it was just an upgrade from 4G. But in fact, if you understand wireless technology and cell phones, you would know that cell phones were never tested for health or safety, and wireless technology was never tested for health or safety. So all of this is devastating for health. We have the health results now from all of these first generations of wireless technology. So we know that this is absolutely devastating for people's health and for the environment. And 5G is going to be a very, very different technology. It has very little in common with 4G, actually. It would be truly, truly devastating.
What is the difference between 4G and 5G if 5G is so different?
Well, the difference between earlier generations of wireless technology and 5G is that you could think of 4G as an antenna that you might see in the distance, and I tend to think of what 4G puts out as a soup. So we're all sitting in this soup 24/7. But what 5G does is it's basically densification on every level. So with the 5G box, you have up to or more than 1,000 mini antennas in one box. And what this produces is a beam. So it's beam forming. It's like a laser, and the laser goes out, very concentrated signal, and it does not attenuate over distance. So it does not weaken over distance as the 4G signal does, and therefore it maintains its power, and therefore it's particularly devastating. Now, the densification aspect of 5G is huge because, again, as I said, 4G, you might see it off in the distance, but 5G would be absolutely everywhere. And the list of places from which 5G will come at you is so long that it's hard to enumerate. So for a start, smart meters are part of the 5G rollout. LED streetlights are part of the 5G rollout. cabinets on the street, so they have designed new cabinets on the street which will let the signal pass. Under manhole covers. So imagine that you're taking your baby for a walk and you see a friend and you leave the baby standing over the manhole cover. Your baby is being irradiated. Then you have satellites in the Earth orbit. So now SpaceX has asked for permission to put up a further 30,000 satellites. So now we're up to a figure of 53,000 satellites in the Earth orbits. Plus they want to put pseudo-satellites in the stratosphere. Plus you're talking about networked civil aircraft, which would network between them and then beam down broadband down to Earth level, ground level. And also the plan is to put the 5G antennas approximately every third house. So you're talking about a huge densification. You're talking about putting these antennas extremely close to where people are and where they live, outside their bedroom windows, for example. You're also talking about different power levels. Now, because we have no standards for 5G, if you look at the the press conference with Tom Wheeler in 2016, Tom Wheeler said it. We're not waiting for the standards. We're not waiting for committees and commissions to sit around deciding the standards. Therefore, we have no standards for this. This is completely unprecedented. So we actually do not have a definition for 5G. It is undefined. They're making it up as they go along. In terms of frequencies, people think that the higher frequencies will be used, which is true. There have been frequency auctions, and it's proposed to use frequencies up to 100 gigahertz for 5G. But also they will use low frequencies. And we have to consider that even extremely low frequencies do tremendous damage to the human body. So it's a common misconception that 5G just means higher frequencies. It doesn't, and it will devastate on all levels and at all frequencies.
But isn't it because of the low frequencies that a lot of scientists who are allowed to speak in the mainstream media, though, are saying that it's not a danger to our health or anything else?
Well, 5G is complicated. The whole issue of wireless technology is complicated. The problem we have is that a lie has been perpetrated ever since we've had wireless technology. The lie is the thermal hypothesis. And the thermal hypothesis says that there are no biological effects to microwave radiation, which is absolutely not true. The US military collected compendia of thousands of studies detailing the biological effects of microwave radiation precisely because they wanted to develop weapons. So the biological effects are absolutely known. The World Health Organization organized a symposium in 1973, which was actually called The Biologic Effects and Health Hazards of Microwave Radiation. But since then, they have conveniently forgotten that they organized that symposium. So it is absolute fact that there are biological effects, but the regulatory agencies have been basically taken over and corrupted by industry, and the lie of the thermal hypothesis has been propagated. So they want us to believe that there are only heating effects. So all your cell phones are based on this principle that there are only heating effects, and therefore if you simply hold the phone away from your head, you're not being heated, and therefore there's no problem. And they test this on plastic mannequins filled with gel, into which they put a probe to ascertain to what extent this mannequin has been heated. So it's absolutely fraudulent, and people think if they hold the phone away, it's not affecting them. But of course, it's going through their arm, it's going into their body, and there are biological effects. So the whole body is being totally devastated by wireless technology and cell phones.
So what are the possible dangers and health effects of electromagnetic radiation and frequencies?
Well, now we have the results. After 25 years of cell phone use, now we have the results, and they could not be more devastating. We have 9 to 10-year-old children presenting with the brains of senile old people. We have the highest suicide rate in the US since World War II.
So how is suicide connected to those frequencies?
Because it causes changes in the brain and it causes people to become depressed. So we have the first 3-year fall in life expectancy since World War I, and numerous other devastating health effects, really too numerous to list. British insurer Legal & General, the CEO, recently told us that there is now a premature death trend.
What does that mean? Is that because it causes cancer and other illnesses?
There was recently a paper which was putting out a hypothesis that it is wireless technology, it is the ubiquitous nature of electromagnetic radiation that is causing neurological disease and deaths in the Western world. So we have the information now. The Blue Cross Blue Shield Health Insurance Association in the United States put out a report in April this year where they said that millennials, who are the first generation to have used cell phones for a considerable period of time, they have double-digit increases in all the major diseases, and you have 27-year-olds now who are presenting with dementia. It could not be more devastating. You also have a prominent scientist in the US who has predicted that by 2025, every second baby born in the US will be autistic. Autism and ADHD are both associated with electromagnetic radiation.
And we have the studies to prove that.
Absolutely. These are the studies.
So
These
people,
are the results.
when they hear you talk about these things, and we will talk much more about it, can actually do their research and find some evidence about this.
Absolutely. If people go and they read the articles that I've written, I reference everything that I say and I give links to all the studies. The University of Aachen has an EMF portal, and on that portal there are over 28,000 studies. Not all of those are peer-reviewed, obviously, but we have an enormous, an overwhelming amount of studies showing these biological effects, which are absolutely known.
So why don't we hear about them on the mainstream news? Why is it not something that they're taking into consideration? Why don't they stop it?
Because this industry, the telecommunications industry, is one of the most powerful industries on this planet, and they estimate that the 5G rollout is worth approximately $17 trillion. And you will also find, since about 3 months ago, because of the success of our appeal and because so many millions of people now know about the dangers of 5G, the mainstream media started a pushback of fake news. This is mainstream media fake news, which started about 3 months ago. And you will find that, for example, the BBC has some sort of collaboration going with a telecommunications company. Le Monde in France has done 2 attacks on what we are saying, one very recently, which was specifically about our appeal.
That was a French paper, right?
That's one of the main French newspapers, and that is owned by a man who owns a telecommunications company. And so it goes on. You will find very strong links between the telecommunications companies and the newspapers. So, for example, there was an article in the New York Times about 3 or 4 months ago attacking what we're saying. And then it was found, in fact, attacking what Russia Today America was saying about 5G. And then Russia Today answered back and said, well, actually, the New York Times has a collaboration with Verizon, one of the very major American telecommunications companies. So, frankly, the mainstream media has a huge conflict of interest. Not a single whisper comes out about the dangers of 5G. There is no balance. And if you listen to what they say about the evidence, please listen carefully, because I've written an article about this, and it's called BBC Fake News on 5G, How to Decode This Fake News. Because if you listen very carefully to what they say, every time they say there is no evidence, they say there is no solid evidence, there is no convincing evidence, there is no valid evidence. Listen for the key word. There's lots of evidence, but it's not solid, convincing, valid, believable, etc., etc.
So is it not solid? Is it not believable? Is it not something we can trust?
Well, do you want to dismiss in excess of 28,000 studies? And in that case, why then would the American military have compiled all these compendia on the biological effects of microwave radiation? Why would they have bothered if none of this is solid, convincing, valid or believable?
But all of these people behind the scenes, or whoever is part of rolling it out, they will be radiated as well.
I don't know what they believe. I think that there are some innocent parties in this. I certainly believe that a lot of the people who work for the telecommunications companies cannot be aware of this. And certainly,
so it's on a need-to-know basis. It's more like a compartmentalized...
Well, no, it goes back to the thermal hypothesis. You see, the regulatory agencies have put out the lie about the thermal hypothesis, and a lot of people have believed it because they're simply not aware of the biological effects. And so the main culprit in this is the so-called International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, ICNIRP. And this has this very grand name, International Commission, so we should all respect this International Commission. What this is simply a club under German law. Now, I could go and I could start a club and I could call myself the International Commission. So this International Commission, so-called, it appoints its own members. There is no transparency, there is no supervision, it has no legal standing in international law, and yet clearly they must be doing the bidding of industry. Their pronouncements, they dismiss all the science on the biological effects. They say there is only thermal effect. And then, mysteriously, their pronouncements are taken up by the World Health Organization and by the International Telecommunication Union, both of which are UN organizations. And as far as I can see, there is no legitimacy in the fact that their pronouncements are taken up. And you may also wish to consider that on ICNIRP's website, they actually have a disclaimer disclaiming all responsibility for any of their pronouncements, obviously including their so-called safety guidelines, which actually don't protect anybody from anything whatsoever.
And the UN is not taking any action on this either, right?
The UN is the chief promoter of this.
But you worked for the United Nations for a long time, so why aren't they doing that? Do you think that the United Nations is actually a part of the New World Order structure?
I have no idea if they are part of the New World Order, but you can just look at what the United Nations actually does.
You worked there.
I worked there, and I came into this because in December 2015, I was working in Vienna at the Vienna International Centre, and they put up public access points on the ceilings. Now, these public access points were for Wi-Fi and cell phones, and they have very little in common with your home Wi-Fi router. They are much, much more powerful. So when I saw these go up on the ceiling, I was extremely concerned, and I tried to bring it to the attention of the authorities in Vienna, none of whom listened to me. And I was sick as a result of that. I was sick for 7 months with flu, cold, and the symptoms of flu.
Caused by that, you think?
Well, I would say so. I didn't realise this until afterwards when I was talking to a friend. I didn't realise it at the time, but afterwards I thought, well, gosh, that happened as soon as those things went up. And the symptoms of flu are almost identical to the symptoms of radiation poisoning. So it's very difficult for a doctor to differentiate between the two. So I was sick for 7 months, and because nobody would listen to me and because I was extremely concerned about the situation, I actually took early retirement to get out of that. And but I continued to try to alert people, including the medical service at the UN in Vienna, and nobody listened. Nobody even replied to my emails. So in the end, when I heard that the Secretary General was coming in May last year and was going to speak to staff, you have to understand that when you work for the UN, you keep a grounds pass when you retire. So you're still part of the UN, if you like, even though you're retired.
So you had access to go there?
Yes, so I went there to warn him about these public access points and also about 5G. Now, what I find extremely interesting, so that video is now on the internet, and if you watch that video, what is extremely interesting is that it took me quite a time to read what I had to say out to the Secretary General. So in other words, he had about 3 minutes to think how to respond to me. And when he responded to me, he laughed.
Oh.
Which is, I find that quite a strange response.
Why did he laugh? That is so immature, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I had brought my very serious concerns to him about the welfare of the UN staff. I mean, I hear anecdotally that many people have had breast cancer, some people have died, people have had heart attacks. I know a lot of people have had burnout, which is also associated with exposure to electromagnetic radiation. No, it's to do with electromagnetic radiation. There's also connections there. So I know that there have been very serious consequences, but I only know anecdotally. What I was asking was that, for example, building biology experts should be brought in. Nobody needs to listen to me. I'm not an expert. I'm simply raising the alarm. So I asked the UN to bring in experts, and they failed to do so. Now, what I find interesting about the fact that the Secretary General laughed is that he could have done something else. So I raised my very serious concerns about the welfare of the staff, and his response is to laugh. I find that wildly inappropriate myself. And also think about what he did not say. So I should have been reassured if these public access points are fine on the ceilings, and he knows that they are fine, then actually he should have reassured me and said, oh, don't worry about a thing. It's all absolutely safe. He did not do that.
So other than finding it funny and laughing, did he actually say something, well, constructive or anything that you could use positively?
He said that he would consult the World Health Organization, which he did not do subsequently. Now, then you have to look at what the Secretary General actually did do after I told him about 5G. First of all, I should say that he is an electrical engineer by training and also a physicist, and he also taught telecommunications signals early in his career. So if there's one man on this planet who should have known what I was talking about the dangers,
should have been him, shouldn't it?
Have known. So what did he actually do? Approximately 2 months later, he appointed a high-level panel on digital cooperation, and this was to promote digitalization. And this panel was staffed solely with industry insiders. So this was all Melinda Gates and the man who started Alibaba, all people who were pro 5G. So this was about promoting 5G. There was not a single doctor involved. There was not a single environmentalist involved. Then he went on to bring out a document on digital technologies. So basically, you have these digital technologies being pushed through absolutely every UN program. The word, if you look at the literature, the word that's used in the UN literature and other literature emanating from the European Union and the US, the word they use is to blanket the earth. Their intention is to blanket the earth, as I have already described, 53,000 satellites, pseudo-satellites in the stratosphere, networked civil aviation, densification of antennas absolutely everywhere. They intend that every square centimetre of this planet be bathed in electromagnetic radiation. Now, when you consider that already we have the canaries in the coal mine, you could say, are so-called electro-hypersensitive people. Now, this term electro-hypersensitivity, it's actually a political term, because when you talk about, oh, you are electro-hypersensitivity, this points the finger at you. Oh, you have a problem because you are electro-hypersensitive. The rest of us are not feeling anything because this is the problem. You don't feel anything. Yeah? We are all being attacked and our health is being massively damaged and the environment is being damaged. So some people, and we don't know why, but some people feel this where others don't. Yeah?
Maybe later on they'll feel it.
With 5G, I mean, I'm quite sure that everybody will feel it because this is going to be.
But
so
this is
intense.
the United Nations and the WHO we're talking about here. People depend on these organizations. They think they're doing something good, right? Trying to help the human race. That's at least the official narrative.
Yes, there tends to be a very positive view. But we live in a society where authority is respected and people defer to authority. And I would say this is exactly the problem, that people do not realize that actually they need to inform themselves of what is really going on. And people need to realize that they have a lot of power to change what is going on.
But the UN Secretary General, he knows because he's part of it. He knew about all of this being an engineer, right? That's what you just said.
I would say he undoubtedly has to know. Yes.
I mean, really know, in depth.
Well, really know, yes,
so
in depth.
This, he knows, and therefore he's part of the knowledge and going against what is actually secure and is good for the human race. That's really what it comes down to, right?
I don't believe in coincidences. He was appointed Secretary General at the time when it was known that 5G was going to be rolled out. So I don't believe in coincidences.
And he was not too thrilled to meet you when you asked him those questions or presented this material in front of him?
He patronized me. He may be regretting it now because it was actually what he did that caused me to start cooperating and working on the international appeal to stop 5G on Earth and in space.
And we're going to talk, of course, much more about that.
Yeah.
But why do you think that they're rolling it out at rapid speed so fast? Why does that have to happen so fast?
That question was actually asked in an EU report. It was asked sceptically in an EU report earlier this year. And frankly, I think nobody knows why this has been characterised as a race. My guess is that they need to roll it out before people really realise, or they hoped to roll it out before people really realise the dangers of 5G. And by giving it the name 5G, people assume that it's just more of the same as 4G, but just a lot better and a lot faster. So they were hoping really that nobody would inform the public about the real nature of 5G. So by characterising it as a race, you have to get there before any other country gets there.
Because it's easier to stop it than to take it back, or to actually disarm it or destroy it afterwards.
No, I think they wanted to roll it out before people could realise how damaging it would be, and before people had an opportunity to organise and stop it. You know?
It's more difficult to take it away once it's there.
I would say it's extremely difficult to take it away once it's there. How are you going to take down 53,000 satellites once they are up? The whole point about 5G is that it affects your brain. I mean, not only does it affect your body, but it affects your brain, and therefore it affects your judgment. It's also can be used for mind control because it's very closely associated with HARP. It has many of the same characteristics as far as I can see.
Please, for the viewers, just explain what HARP is.
HARP is the, if I can remember correctly, the high frequency auroral, anyway, HAARP, and it's an ionospheric heater. And what you can do with HARP is you can mind control people, you can change their emotional state, all sorts of things.
Weather?
And, the weather, yes, you can interfere with the weather.
Yeah.
It's a very sinister tool, and it heats the ionosphere. Now, my question would be, I think that there are very close parallels between HARP and 5G. Of course, nobody's drawing attention to this.
Some people say that HARP, which was in Alaska, is no longer functioning.
No, that's not true. There was an interview with Dr. Nick Begich, who has written several books on this, and it's all a switcheroo. It's all just public relations to make people believe things.
So it's kept under the radar.
In his opinion, it was taken over, I think, from the American military. It was given to DARPA. And as we know, DARPA is one of the most sinister organisations on this planet. And from DARPA, it was then transferred to the University of Alaska. So it comes under the University of Alaska now. But the University of Alaska was already working with the American military on HARP. So it's just a question of PR. Now the University of Alaska is still providing the same services to those same clients, if you want to call it. So basically it's still controlled by the same people. HARP has multiplied over the years. So I believe, I can't substantiate that. I haven't done any detailed research into HARP, but I believe that there are HARP stations all around the world at this stage.
The European version is placed in Norway.
Exactly.
In
exactly.
Tromsø.
Yes, and that was just updated. A couple of years ago, there was a huge investment in that. So far from being downgraded, I would say this is something that has been upgraded.
So just explain DARPA. What does that stand for? What is DARPA?
Defense Agency Research Program. I've forgotten what it stands for. This is the organisation that does some of the most sinister projects on the planet. So, for example, they have designed these battlefield robots that look like robotic dogs. Now, the problem on the battlefield, and this really shows you the connection with 5G, because you can... So, for example, the invasion of Iraq by the US.
In 2004 or 3.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of the veterans from the Iraq so-called war came back and complained of some sort of peculiar syndrome. Now, it would appear that, in fact, the Iraq invasion, they were using electronic weapons. So if you listen to what Mark Steele has to say, Mark Steele is based in the UK and he's a weapons expert, and he says that 5G is battlefield interrogation technology, which it is. So what happened with these Iraq veterans is that they were very damaged by this battlefield interrogation technology, and therefore you really cannot deploy soldiers on the battlefield anymore, which is why you need these DARPA robotic dogs.
Like Manchurian Candidate syndrome, really.
That sort of thing, yes, it's a similar technology. I mean, we also have to realize that the mind control technology goes back decades and was taken from the Nazis in Operation Paperclip, where a lot of thousands of Nazi scientists were brought into the US, and all the various projects that they worked on were taken up by the Americans. And of course, they've had decades to improve this technology. So mind control, yes, and the mind control technology is absolutely real. And
the
extremely
MK
sophisticated, MK Ultra, and it's extremely sophisticated at this stage. And 5G also includes mind control.
So frequencies can be beamed from this satellite grid around Earth that they're creating with this technology, and it can be beamed into a person's mind in order to make them do certain things or think in a certain direction. Is that what you mean?
Well, we have the proof, you see. This was deployed during the Iraq War when these frequencies were beamed at Iraqi soldiers. In fact, it was, I think it was put on top of a radio signal, so when they were listening to prayers and so forth. And they went into fear and panic, and they were told to put down their weapons, and they did. So they didn't understand where this fear and panic came from. So we've already had a public demonstration of this.
Is 5G part of UN Agenda 21, also now known as UN Agenda 2030?
I can't really speak to that because I don't have expertise in that area. I would simply say that 5G...
Even if you worked for the UN?
Well, no, because it depends who you work for. I worked in the conference management service, so we were providing services to conferences, so translations and documentation, conference rooms, etc. And, you know, there are many different parts of the UN. So Agenda 21 is the UN Environment Programme, and we don't have the UN Environment Programme in Vienna. In Vienna, we work on space. So I edited a lot of the space documents, which is why I have some knowledge of space law and the issues in space.
And they also work closely with NASA?
Not necessarily, no.
When you talk about space?
Oh, well, you know, there are various parts of the UN work on space. So you have the Office of Disarmament Affairs is one. The First Committee in New York is another one. And in Vienna we have the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And so for several years I edited all the documents for them, including their legal and scientific and technical subcommittees. And what I can tell you is that the two major issues that were always talked of were space debris and weaponization. So right now, I don't know if it's because of 25 years of cell phone use, but it's like we have gone into some sort of collective amnesia, because the 5G rollout is totally illegal. It's totally illegal on every level. the number of international treaties that it breaches, I can't even list them for you, but environmental treaties, human rights, space law, it's astonishing. And so the two issues at the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space were always space debris and weaponization. And it's almost as if those discussions never ever took place, because now we're putting up 53,000 satellites, and the two issues, let's separate them. So the space debris. There was a paper written, I think, back in the 1970s and 1980s by a man called Kessler, who posited what became called the Kessler syndrome. And what he says is that if you reach a point where you have so much space debris that it starts colliding, you could have a cascade effect where you cannot stop the constant cascade of collisions, and you would have a situation where the space orbits became unusable for 1,000 years.
Please explain to us where this space debris comes from. How does that happen?
Well, we've had a lot of space exploration, obviously, for decades, and so some certain countries have actually attacked their own satellites.
So it's satellites, from satellites, it's from rockets, or from
rockets,
space
satellites,
stations
all
they have there.
All the activities that have gone on in space. So you've had, I think the US has also attacked its own satellite. Certainly China did, and India did. India did that earlier this year. And when you destroy your own satellite, of course, it shatters into I don't know how many pieces. And you have to consider that the velocity at which these pieces travel means that the tiniest piece could cause such damage, for example, to the International Space Station, that it could no longer function. So the tiniest, it's not a question of size, the tiniest piece can be absolutely devastating.
Wow.
And they estimate that there are over 500,000 pieces of space debris already, and by 2025 they estimate...
How can it cause damage when it's so tiny?
Because of the velocity at which it travels. Also there was a project during the Cold War called Project West Forward, where the Americans put up 480 million needles into the Earth orbits. And those are still up there. They're floating around. So if you look at a picture of space debris, if you go onto YouTube, for example, and look up the Kessler syndrome or space junk, you can actually see the tremendous amount of space debris that exists up there. And so at the UN, for year after year after year, they constantly talked about the dangers from space debris. And now suddenly we've forgotten all of that. It's like we never had those discussions, but now we're going to put up 53,000 satellites and nobody considers it a problem anymore. But the other issue that was constantly came up year by year was the issue of weaponization of space. That the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 bans weapons in space. It's actually illegal. Now, the problem with the weaponization of space is, of course, you don't have visibility. You can't look out the window and see what's happening in the Earth orbits. So if a military satellite, and of course the militaries all depend increasingly on their intelligence satellites. So if one of these satellites blips out suddenly and makes that country vulnerable, now if that country believes that it was another state that caused the blindness of their satellite, they could launch nuclear missiles. They could think that they're under attack. It's tremendously dangerous. This issue of weaponization in space. And again, this is another issue where it's as if these conversations never ever took place, because now we have NATO this December intends to designate space a domain of warfare. And this year, President Trump announced a space force. President Macron of France has also announced a space force. Where are we going now? We have descended into lunacy now. And all I can suppose is that because we've had 25 years of cell phones, people have lost their minds. It's unimaginable what is happening now.
Some people say that the governments of the world, well, the top elite factions of the governments are working with alien races, people from other worlds. What are your thoughts on that when you're talking about, let's say, human-made space stations around Earth?
I can't speculate about alien races. I mean, my personal opinion is I don't see why there should not be alien races. If we exist, why should alien races not equally exist? But I can't really speak to that. But I can speak to artificial intelligence. Again, this is not an area where I have expertise.
People think that 5G is actually, let's just say, a pathway, a route to AI, artificial intelligence,
absolutely.
and connected.
5G is what facilitates artificial intelligence.
Is that the agenda?
5G, in my view, is it's about a total surveillance and mind control and kill grid. That's what 5G is.
A kill grid?
Yes.
In order to kill the population?
Well, people speculate on that.
What are your thoughts?
Well, people say, is it a weapon? If you have a technology which is potentially going to annihilate everything on Earth, do we need to decide whether it's a weapon or not? I mean, the only difference between it being a weapon and not a weapon is just intention.
But why would the leaders of the world and even the moguls in the financial system who's behind the whole control system, why would they want to kill a large number of the population on Earth, known as depopulation also?
Please don't ask me for insights into the mind of psychopaths. I am not the author of 5G. I think it is more insane, demented than anything I have ever come across in my life.
Is it because they think we're too many, or is it because a growing number of the population is waking up to what possibly is behind what we talked about just before a little bit, the New World Order structure, a one world government strategy?
Well, for me, it is a form of madness. What we have in the West is we have the materialist reductionist paradigm. And this is very much left brain thinking. So in left brain thinking, everything is separate. So nothing is ever seen in context. And in left brain thinking, you are very much in fear, you tend to exercise control. The right brain thinking is much more holistic and much more accepting of the idea that you cannot grasp everything. Not everything is understandable. So the left brain thinking is materialistic. Now, if you subscribe to this kind of thinking, which frankly I don't, Nikola Tesla said that if you think of the universe in terms of energy frequency and vibration, you would make more progress in a decade in science than ever before. So clearly it's an energy universe. I mean, this is absolutely indisputable, and I don't understand why anybody would even argue about it. Even at school, we are taught that everything is atoms and molecules. So we know that everything is energy, and when you touch something, you should know by now that what you're touching is, it's about electron repulsion. You're not actually touching something solid because there is nothing solid.
Because atoms have no solidity. So
absolutely.
In fact, everything is holographic in structure, or?
Oh, according to some theories, yes. But it's an energy universe. But when you believe, as many scientists extraordinarily, still perpetuate this belief that we live in a material world, then you tend to think that everything is scarce and perishable, life is limited, and therefore you live in fear. And you believe that the resources of the world are limited because they're made of matter. Now, when you believe that, then you start to worry that you have too many people on Earth. So, depopulation agenda, is it a conspiracy theory? Well, I would invite people to go and do the research.
Or a conspiracy fact.
A conspiracy fact, because if you go and do the research and you look at eugenics, this has been touted for well over 100 years. And very prominent people such as George Bernard Shaw were talking about finding a humane gas to reduce the human population. So if
Bill Gates talked about it.
Bill Gates talked about it as well.
Even Prince Philip.
I don't know if that's true or not. I've certainly heard it. But the eugenics and the depopulation agenda is absolutely real. So whether 5G is intended to depopulate the planet, I couldn't say. But as to its potential for doing so, absolutely.
What's the reason for AI? What is artificial intelligence? Well, that of course explains a little bit what it is, but please talk about why we need that. Why do we want to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence?
Well, this again, for me, it goes to your perception of our existence and our potential as human beings. Our brain is fantastically powerful. So when Elon Musk talks about the Neuralink, it seems to me a complete inversion. So what he's offering is that people should connect up their brains to the internet, and artificial intelligence can be thought of as algorithms. Yeah? So, in terms of algorithms, I mean, it's pathetic and childish. Yeah? So I think that this kind of Neuralink and this kind of artificial intelligence is actually about tapping our brain power. It's not about us connecting ourselves to the internet and tapping into the internet. No, it's that for such an internet to work, they would actually need our brain power. So it's complete nonsense to think that you want to connect your brain via Neuralink. Yeah?
To imprison the mind.
Yes, I think it's about imprisoning the mind, absolutely, yes. But as to artificial intelligence, I think that there are different perceptions of artificial intelligence. It always seemed to me, I was never interested in Facebook. But if you look back to the beginning of the internet, you used to receive these emails from people which said, oh, you have to send on this email to 10 people within the next 15 minutes and then something wonderful will happen to you. And I was always very suspicious of this, so I never did it. And then Facebook started up, and it was very clear to me from the start that Facebook was about getting people's data. So what they've collected over the years is the human reaction to every type of human event in order to develop machines such as Sophia the Robot, so that Sophia can come out with a reaction to anything that she might be presented with because it's been picked up from social media. So is this creature intelligent? I would say absolutely not. It's just based on algorithms. Now, whether there is another type of artificial intelligence on another level which could be trained to be intelligent, well, that may be possible. Yes, and certainly...
What are you talking about now? You're talking about something otherworldly, extraterrestrial, or well connected to that?
There's the algorithmic AI, which I think, frankly, is pretty childish, and it's just imitative of human beings, a sort of fake imitation. But there's also another level to AI where it's posited that machines can actually learn. And that, I think, is extremely sinister. And I think it's that aspect of AI that the UK Prime Minister was addressing when he spoke at the General Assembly just a few weeks ago. And he gave a very, very strong warning about the threat from AI. And he spent some time on it, and he talked about it as a dark cloud lowering over the human race, over which potentially the human race would have no say whatsoever. So I was very glad to see
Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson, and I was very
Why
glad
do you
to see
think
it
that
as-
he actually did that? If he's part of, like all presidents and prime ministers in a way, supposedly part of this New World Order structure and the whole agenda behind that, why do you think he actually spoke and was allowed to talk about that?
Well, because I do think that occasionally you can get wild cards. I don't think everybody, I personally don't live in fear and paranoia. And so I think that it's perfectly possible to get somebody who is independent-minded. And don't forget that Boris Johnson came to be Prime Minister in a fairly accidental way because of Brexit. Now, there's been some questioning about the how can I put it? The authenticity of what Boris Johnson said. And in the second part of his speech, he went on to talk about the importance of vaccinations and so on.
And you're not for that?
No, and I just think that that was window dressing because he had to be supportive of technologies for strategic reasons. But if you listen to the first part of his speech, Boris Johnson is a maverick. And I think that 5G is going to be combated by mavericks. What you need is free thinkers, people who don't just go with the herd, people who actually are clear-sighted and can see what is happening and are prepared to stand up and oppose it. And it seems to me that Boris Johnson is one of those. I'm told that he has planted an enormous number of trees. Certainly he always used to cycle to the House of Commons. So it seems to me that he's also a writer and a journalist, and he's benefited from a very good education. So I would say that he was genuine when he was talking.
But you don't like what he said about vaccinations?
Well, it would appear that possibly the purpose of the vaccinations is again something to do with interfering of the processes of the mind, because the adjuvant that is used in vaccinations is aluminium. And it would appear that aluminium in some way also works with these frequencies. Now, I'm not sure exactly how, but certainly aluminium and barium had something to do with the HARP processes. So equally, I would suggest that that's going to affect the brain, the combination of the aluminium adjuvant and these frequencies.
And microchipping the population, even through vaccines,
well, you
some
don't
people
need
say.
to microchip the population because everybody has cell phones and they're addicted to them. And it would be my guess that very soon it will become compulsory to carry a smartphone. I don't have one. I don't want to be mind controlled. I don't have one. I took a hammer and I smashed my cell phone in January this year. And I've never been happier than to be free of this mobile phone.
So please talk about your thoughts on climate change, which is the big thing at the moment. We are in October 2019, and all through this year we've been hearing about the climate, almost that the world is going under, and that the whole CO2 scare, and this Swedish girl, 16-year-old girl, Greta Thunberg, and how she has been promoted all over the world. But it seems that everybody is worried about the environment and the climate. But the same people is not very worried, it seems, about 5G. So what are your thoughts on climate change? Is it real or not? And why is it not connected to 5G?
As far as I'm concerned, you cannot talk about anthropogenic climate change as long as you are interfering with the weather, which is what you're doing with HARP and it's what you're doing with geoengineering. Now, as far as little Greta is concerned, I thought if you look at what she said in front of the UN, this terrible rage and distorted expression on her face, pointing the finger and accusing adults of stealing her childhood, this is revolting. This child is being manipulated. She has a German handler who is paid by one of the George Soros organizations. The child is autistic. She's being manipulated. And this is about distracting people from the reality of the danger of 5G. The powers that be want everybody to be looking in the wrong direction. And if you look at all the green parties, the environmental organizations are so busy talking about anthropogenic climate change, and they absolutely refuse to look at electromagnetic radiation, which has been far more devastating over the last 25 years. We have lost between 75 and 80% of our insects at this stage. If you look, there are papers, studies that have been done. The insect loss in the Puerto Rico rainforest can also be attributed to the installation of a very large radar antenna there. There were other studies done in Germany on radar antennas, Cold War radar antennas, which have shown absolute devastation to the environment. So in my view, and in the view of a lot of scientists, the environmental devastation is actually far more attributable to electromagnetic radiation than it is to any hypothesized climate change.
But everybody is talking about that now. It's covered all in the mainstream media, on the news every single day. Everybody's, even scientists, are saying that we have man-made climate change.
There's a substantial body of scientists who say that there is no anthropogenic climate change. And if you look into the climate issue, you will find that the science has actually been distorted, and the calculations have been very conveniently done to exclude the ice age. So these figures have been distorted. We know that there has been manipulation in scientific circles. So the whole climate change agenda originated, there was a very interesting document published a couple of months ago by the Canadian Civil Liberties Organization, and they actually identified this fake climate change agenda as coming from, I think, the 1970s. And
Club of Rome.
A Club of Rome, exactly. So it's something that has been cooked up to put people in fear and manipulate them. Now, as to the real motive behind the climate change agenda, this was revealed a couple of weeks ago, where I came across a very interesting article which included a video where our little Greta has now teamed up with a very fake environmental journalist called George Monbiot, who writes for the UK Guardian. So we had little Greta lying on a carpet on her stomach, looking into the camera. So they were clearly trying to make her look like an ordinary teenage girl and not an autistic child. So she spoke first, and then she was followed by George Monbiot, who told us, wow, we have a machine that converts CO2 to oxygen. And it's called a tree. So now we have, the trees are now machines. This again is materialist reductionist paradigm. It's the madness of seeing everything as mechanistic. The tree is a living organism. This is not a machine. And what I further learned from this article is that actually the aim of all this is a new regime, which is naturocracy. So naturocracy is now about monetizing nature. So it's not enough that the neoliberals of the last 40 years have stolen everything on this planet, stolen all the resources, exploited everybody, stacked up vast fortunes in tax havens, but now they want the Earth orbits, they want the stratosphere, they want the ionosphere, and they want every last blade of grass. This is what this is about. It's about monetizing nature. That is the purpose of the fake climate change agenda. And I don't know about you, but I find that frankly horrifying. This is my planet. This is my home. And I will do everything to defend this planet and protect all the creatures that live on it and all the nature that lives on it. So I would say to people, they have to stop following blindly what they find in the media. Now, I suspect that we do know that the cell phones are about mind control and manipulation. We know that people do become addicted to cell phones. Weapons expert Barry Trower has told us that these phones are 17 times as addictive as heroin. So what you have now is, I think you have memes that are put out by the media, and they are reinforced by these cell phones to make people into herds who will simply follow what they have been told, and you can just move them left and right and manipulate them. I would ask people to stop parroting absolute nonsense which has no scientific foundation whatsoever, and to actually go and do their own research. There's enough information.
Most people
now.
believe the sciences when they speak through the mainstream media. And
well,
some people,
it's always a manipulation. I mean, cui bono, who is making money out of this? People need to ask some serious, hard questions.
who benefits?
Who benefits?
But some people also, some of those people, some climate activists who are advocating that we have to really worry about the climate, say now that the oil company thing called Exxon is part of this anti-climate change propaganda happening, saying that it's not real because they are worried about the whole oil industry thing. Do you think that could also be gagged and orchestrated?
I think everything is a fiction at this stage. I mean, if people were to wake up and look around them, I think they would quickly see that everything is a fiction. And I find it very interesting to note that you recently saw these so-called Extinction Rebellion people, who again are funded by the same George Soros organizations, by the way. But recently they all dressed up in red robes and protested somewhere. Now, did nobody else notice the parallels with the ISIS theatricals, where the ISIS so-called terrorists were all dressed up in theatrical costumes and all arranged, posing for photographs? It's the same manipulation. I think that I would really plead with people to get rid of these dangerous cell phones, because people are clearly being prevented from thinking properly. Their brains don't function properly, and they're being seriously misled. People need to get rid of these cell phones. They need to switch off their Wi-Fi routers. They need to cable their computers, and they need to start seriously looking at the facts.
Here in Denmark and maybe other places around the world, smart meters are mandatory. It's actually forced that we must have a smart meter rigged up in our homes. How can we actually say no to that?
Lucas, you can say no to anything. Yes, it depends whether you are in your power and your sovereignty. We are sovereign human beings. It doesn't matter what man-made laws there are. It doesn't matter what you are told. Ultimately, you are a human being and you are sovereign. So you don't have to be told anything whatsoever. you simply refuse to cooperate. And this is really what is the problem on this planet, that people think they have no power. They do not realize that they are creator beings, and their intention creates everything. What do you think creates everything that we have around us? Everything started with an idea. Everything started with a creation of a mind. Everything that we have here is about intention. So the most important thing that we have to do now is say no to this whole agenda, every single part of it. Now, you don't need everybody to do that. You simply need a sufficient number for a tipping point. So people need to take back their power. In fact, I would simply say they need to recognize the power that they have, and they need to start asserting it. They just have to refuse. So do what you feel necessary to make sure that you do not have a smart meter. And I would say further that you have a lot of... So the 5G rollout is taking place on a local basis. And people are following orders. Oh, the government told us we have to do this. Okay, but the government is acting illegally under national and international law. So are you like Nazis now? Is that your excuse, that you're going to follow orders and kill your local population? Or are you going to inform yourself and stand up and confront this agenda? Well,
and you certainly do that through the International Appeal to Stop 5G on Earth and in Space. Please talk about this initiative. Who is part of this International Appeal to Stop 5G, and how can people join or sign up? What is the purpose for this appeal? What do you think can be the positive result?
Well, there have been a lot of previous scientific appeals. You know, people don't realize this. There have been at least 60 previous appeals by scientists and doctors, and none of those succeeded in coming to public notice, really. So they really didn't have any effect because they remained within those closed circles, and the governments and institutions just ignored them. Now, what's different about our international appeal to stop 5G on Earth and in space is that, one, it's extremely comprehensive. It's telling you the whole context of 5G and not purely addressing the science. So it tells a story to people. It sets out the whole situation, and for me, the most important aspect of this appeal is that it provides the information people need, and information is empowering. So that's the most important aspect of the appeal as far as I'm concerned. In terms of an appeal, I think it's questionable making an appeal to the very organizations that are rolling out 5G, appealing to them to stop. I wonder about the effectiveness of that. However, again, the appeal, by signing the appeal, you are joining a project to refuse your consent. So rather than the appeal side of things, it's more like a vehicle to say that you do not agree with this agenda. So in those terms, I think it's extremely powerful. We currently have approximately 165,000 signatories, which includes many thousands of scientists and doctors and also organizations. We would like to have a lot more signatories. It's being sent to the addressees at the moment, but it's going to remain open for people to sign. And I would like to see millions of people sign that appeal because, as I say, that expresses their own intention to oppose this agenda.
How can people sign the appeal?
Well, they simply look up 5G space appeal on the internet and they will instantly find it. There's one other very significant thing about this appeal. is that we chose as our symbol the bee. And the bee is a symbol of life, and it's also an insect that we really love, and we really love it because we know that the bee assists us in having our food. So it's something very beautiful, and it's motivating because we love the bee. Now, a lot of other appeals, they would put a cell phone mast as the symbol of their appeal. Well, you don't motivate people by fear. You motivate people by love. And it's absolutely love that motivates me in campaigning here. For me, this has nothing to do with fear. Now, when people, some people say, oh, they're so powerful. There's nothing I can do to change this because I'm just one person. But this is absolute nonsense, because if you say that, it means that you have not understood 5G. 5G is potentially an annihilation event. Oleg Grigoriev, who is the head of the Russian National Committee on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, he has called 5G a slow Hiroshima. Professor Emeritus Martin Paul has said that with 5G, we can expect societal breakdown within months, not years. So when you really understand 5G, you are not going to say, there is nothing I can do and I have no power. You are absolutely going to stand up and oppose this agenda.
Can 5G be stopped? Stopped from being rolled out?
Absolutely. I've always believed it. I've always said this must be stopped. Now, the important thing is that 5G is unlike any other human challenge we have had, because in the past, when we've made mistakes, for example, with asbestos and tobacco, okay, many people have been injured and many people have died, and then we've adjusted and done something about it. Yeah? But with 5G, you cannot do that. You're talking about a total surveillance, mind control, and kill grid. Once this is in place, you will not be able to stop it. You will already be damaged, and you will not be able to withdraw it. So people have to take action now so that 5G never happens. Now, it's being rolled out as we speak. In many countries it's being rolled out, but there's also huge opposition. People have to realize that millions of people are now aware of the dangers of 5G. I have a list of at least 30 countries where people are opposing the 5G agenda. So far from being powerless, it's absolutely the opposite. I recently published an article where I listed all the official pushback. I'm not talking about demonstrations, I'm talking about official pushback against 5G. And this is massive. We are already succeeding in stopping 5G.
They stopped the rollout in the former EU capital, Brussels, in Belgium,
Absolutely,
didn't they?
Yes.
Why do you think they hesitated or stopped it there and not all over the world?
Well, the environment minister said that the people of Brussels were not guinea pigs, and she acknowledged that the scientific data were not there on the safety of 5G, and therefore she was not prepared to roll it out in Brussels. My question would be, what's happening with the rest of Belgium? Why do the environment ministers there only talk about Brussels? So are they rolling it out in the rest of Belgium, or is it just Brussels that is unique? But you've already had one company has pulled out of Australia, and because they were convinced by the health arguments, and another company has pulled out of the US. So we have to remember that this is being rolled out by commercial companies. So this is their Achilles heel. I would say that we need to keep pushing these companies. These companies cannot get insurance for injuries or damage caused by electromagnetic radiation. So this is their Achilles heel. One thing about these space launches, I would like to know whether these companies launching these satellites actually have insurance, because there is a space liability convention which says that launching states are responsible for any damage caused by objects launched into space. And if these companies cannot get insurance, you have to think about the potential consequences here. I mean, you could have vast areas of this planet destroyed, vast populations affected by this. So these companies need to have, insurance in the many billions. Do they have any insurance at all? I mean, for example, we have Portugal now, which has set up a spaceport, or it's just about to be set up in January 2020, on the island of Santa Maria in the Azores. And if you look at the liability convention, it's the launching state that carries the liability for damage caused by a space launch. So you have to ask the question, why is Portugal establishing its space agency on Santa Maria, which is a little island with nothing? I would guess that they are trying to avoid liability. Now, Portugal is not a signatory to the liability convention, but nevertheless, we need to make these people accountable. What we have with 5G is a total free-for-all. And I come back to the beginning of this conversation where we said that in 2016, Tom Wheeler said that they would not wait for the standards. That means that 5G is completely undefined. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is a crime against humanity under the Nuremberg Code, because there has never been any health or safety testing on 5G. But in my view, it's not that makes it a crime against humanity. What makes it a crime against humanity is that it's undefined and it's a free-for-all. Because if you had to define this and create norms and standards for this before it's rolled out, it would never be rolled out. So the first person who has to be held liable for crimes against humanity is Tom Wheeler of the Federal Communications Commission. But we need now, as the population of the world, we need to hold these people accountable.
And you say that the global warming, climate change scare propaganda is actually a diversion away from 5G, which you say is the essential problem.
Absolutely. The climate change agenda is a total distraction, and it's designed to have people focus on something which is irrelevant. 5G is a planetary emergency, and everybody needs to drop everything to stop 5G.
Is there any possibility?
The people who realise this, Lucas, they have given up their jobs to work on this. I've been working on this day and night since I found out about it, and that's what you do once you understand 5G. If you are not currently working on stopping 5G, it means you don't understand it yet. When you understand it, nothing else matters anymore, because this is about the survival of you, your children, and this planet.
Do you know if there's a possibility that we can shield ourselves from 5G radiation, the electromagnetic frequencies coming from 5G, if it's being rolled out?
This is one of my bêtes noires, my hobby horses. This is another manifestation of the mad thinking of the left brain. Oh, we have a disaster of a technology. Let's find another technology to combat the last technological disaster. And if that turns out to be a disaster, perhaps we can find another technology to combat that as well. The fact is, you cannot shield yourself against 5G. There is no shielding yourself against 5G. You're not going to paint your walls with lead paint. You're not going to wear little doodads, pendants, and so on. There is nothing that you are going to be able to use to shelter yourself from 5G. And even if you did, what then would happen to the environment? How are you going to have your food when we have no pollinators left? Do you want to live in a totally devastated environment where all the trees are dead? So the solution to this has to be holistic. It's not about you solely and your individual survival. This is about the survival of all of us together. And that's why it's so beautiful. I think that this is a problem for individuals to stand up to and cooperate with other individuals. So this is not a problem where you're going to go to an organization or a leader or a government to stop. This is the responsibility of every single individual to confront this. And when you confront 5G, you're confronting something that is more terrifying than anything you have ever confronted in your life, because you are talking about the potential annihilation of everything you have ever related to in your entire life. Everything you've ever known could be annihilated by this. So this is a terror such as you have never felt. You are facing your own death, and you have to look truth in the face. And when you do that, you find that you pass through a trial by fire. And it's necessary. If you like, this trial by fire is transformative, because the only way you can deal with this is to change yourself. We have to change from passive, powerless beings into immensely powerful creator beings and say no to this. And we do that inside ourselves. There are no answers out there. Forget it. Who's doing this? All these authorities that you have believed in all your life, they are the ones doing this. And the only people who are going to stop this are individuals. So for me...
So that is your most important message for people to hear if they are being a little bit fearful after hearing all of what you've said here.
Well, people have to realize that it's necessary to feel the fear. Unless you feel the fear, you have not understood 5G unless you feel this terror. Yeah? But all I can say is, yes, you feel the terror, and it's a process, and you pass through it, and you come out the other side, and you come out the other side transformed. I don't feel any fear about it. I have a job here to do, which is to stop 5G. And I do that in love. I don't do that in fear, because every time I hear something more horrible about an aspect of 5G, which unfortunately I hear pretty much every day, I actually feel more love. Yeah? I feel more love and I feel more connection. When I walk out in the street and I see the children, the little children dancing and playing and smiling and laughing, I feel devastated for them. They don't know that these antennas are underneath manhole covers or coming at them from cabinets on the street that they're passing. They don't know that these cell phones are injuring their brains. They have no idea. These are innocents in all of this. And I feel tremendous love for them. I feel tremendous love for the trees. So everything I hear about 5G now actually generates more love in me. For me, 5G means fifth generation. But for me, what is it generating? It's generating love. Now, people talk about the awakening, 2012 and the awakening. Well, to my mind, 5G is the awakening. That's exactly what it is. So when you confront 5G, you transform internally. And the awakening is not something out there, it's something in here. And it's every individual responding to this threat. And what is unique about 5G is precisely that there is no escape. It's hermetically sealed. You cannot protect yourself because it's going to come at you from everywhere. And therefore, you have to transform. Therefore, the answer is always within yourself. Yeah? So 5G for me is absolutely perfect. And in my team, we always say, I love 5G.
If people want to know more, read your articles, maybe get involved to participate or something, or have you to come to their place or their country for a lecture, how can they contact you? A lot of my articles are published on Global Research. I think they probably have all of my articles at this stage. What is the website?
Well, just look up Global Research and my name, and they'll find me as an author on Global Research, and they'll be able to see all my articles. Now, the mainstream media is completely missing in action over 5G. So what I try to do is I try to write articles which address the different aspects of 5G, and I'm trying to cover the different aspects. Now, as a former UN editor, I reference everything extremely carefully. I don't put anything in my articles that I cannot substantiate. So if people look at the references and the links to those articles, they can do their own research, and they will see that I have all the evidence in those articles.
Under your name?
Under my name.
Claire Edwards.
Absolutely. I try to simplify and make this, I like to put the whole thing in context and try to make it clear for people. So at the end of those articles, they will find my address and they can contact me there.
It's been absolutely fascinating, really informative, mind-blowing, and very, very interesting to have you on the show. And you are obviously a great inspiration, and we wish you the best of luck with the international appeal to stop 5G on Earth and in space. Claire Edwards, thank you very much for doing this interview with
Thank
Age
you
of Truth.
for inviting me, Lucas. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Claire Edwards, and thanks to all of you for watching Age of Truth TV. You can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.